Universalism, you may write All Souls Unitarian Church, 2952 South Peoria Avenue, Tulsa, Oklahoma, 74114. The telephone number is area code 918-743-5459. These programs are produced in an effort to provide alternative religious thought to the fundamentalism which now dominates American broadcasting and cable television. Although production and distribution costs are similar, the plea for support is not. But this is all you will hear. We need help to continue. If you would like to contribute or would like additional information about contributions, please contact Univision by person, mail, or phone. Thank you.
Have you ever noticed that you can tell as much about an organization from the identity of its critics as from its supporters, from what's said against it as from what's said for it?
They don't believe in the Bible as the Word of God.
They don't believe in the hereafter as their just reward and punishment.
They're weird. They don't even believe in the Ten Commandments.
They're even against harmless prayer in public schools.
They want to promote the teaching of evolution in the schools and are against teaching creationism.
They make all this fuss about the separation of church and state, even though religion is the basis of all governments, including America's.
Some of them really get bent out of shape about invocations at government and public meetings.
Hello, I'm Dr. Isaac Asimov, and what you've just heard are some angry criticisms. And if you agree that religion is a subject that can generate strong feelings, you'll probably agree that politics can have just as strong an effect, whether at a dinner party, lunch, or a political demonstration. And from what we've seen more and more frequently in the last few years, it's the volatile combination of political and religious conflict which results all too frequently in all-out war. And unfortunately, things are not getting better. It's still, my religion is better than yours, and my political system is better than yours, and I'm ready to kill you to prove it. Religion and politics, always a very lethal combination. As far back as prehistory and early biblical times, and continuing with the holy wars of the Crusades, and all the many religious and political wars that followed, up to and including today. They're still with us even now, when it could mean the destruction of civilization, or even of the planet itself. Which brings us to the accusations about politics, the other half of this dangerous combination.
They're against meeting our country's military needs.
They're not loyal Americans.
There goes that they again. And the accusations don't stop at religion and politics. We've more to hear on the subject of morality. No, not morality as in ethics, but morality as in sexual behavior. Yours, his, hers, theirs, anybody's.
They're basically amoral.
I mean immoral.
They're in favor of abortion.
They want to teach sex education in schools.
They want to teach birth control in school.
They support gay rights and are responsible for the spread of homosexuality.
They're for free love and against marriage.
And sex or gender can become political too.
They're in favor of ERA. That means a woman goes to war. They're against protecting women in any way. They don't even want men to open doors for them.
And out of the same grab bag of oversimplified knee-jerk attacks,
They want to infiltrate the government, pass laws against religion and morality.
They want to teach our children to make their own decisions without the guidance of the church or the family.
they, there goes that they again. Well, who are the they that makes them so angry? If you haven't been able to guess, perhaps it would help you to know who are making these angry accusations. Mostly they're being made by a rather small, but zealous, well-organized, and very affluent coalition of far-right religious fundamentalists claiming to have 30 million members in the United States. But why has this multi-billion-dollar coalition, with their own schools and colleges and their own satellite television and radio network, chosen to focus on this particular group? What makes them single this group out as the agents of Satan? And something else. If the far left means satanic liberalism, what does the far right mean? Who is this worried Goliath? And why is he so afraid of this newfound David? Well, I guess we know who they are now. Fortunately for all of us, there are enough people who don't jump to conclusions, but instead have objective questions they'd like to have answered. Thinking people who don't want to condemn any person, any idea, or any philosophy because of hearsay or self-serving prodding from the far right.
What is humanism?
When did it start?
Where did it start?
What's secular humanism?
What's religious humanism?
What is Christian humanism?
What is Judaic humanism?
Is humanism against religion?
Is humanism a religion? Is humanism a philosophy? What's the difference between humanism and traditional religion?
Well, now, that was different. Those were questions, not accusations. A central concept of humanism is the right and need for free, objective inquiry, for questioning. No one ever learned anything by accusation. And since humanists would like to explain who and what they are, here are 4 more good questions, not accusations, about some major contemporary issues.
Why do humanists fight parents who want to remove from schools and libraries books that they find undesirable?
Why shouldn't parents who send their children to private schools get tuition tax credits?
Has evolution ever been proven scientifically? If the old ways of believing in God, the Bible, and the 10 Commandments have served us so well, why reject all that and put our trust in humanism?
These questions deserve answers. So let's begin with those about religion.
They don't believe in the Bible as the Word of God.
Humanists believe that the Bible was written by many men about God. First in the Old Testament with the God of the Israelites, and then later on in the New Testament about a man called Jesus. The balance of what the New Testament offers has supposedly been said by men who were the disciples of Jesus. Now, to me, the Bible, the Old and the New Testament, represent man-made codes of behavior, some of which are noble and worthy of their humanistic intentions. Now, humanists believe that all people have the right to believe in and follow the teachings of the Bible, or the God of their choice, if they choose, just as they have the right not to.
They don't believe in the hereafter as their just reward and punishment.
Believing in the hereafter doesn't automatically make one a better or a more moral person. As a humanist, I believe that we should live our lives morally and ethically now, in this world, as though there were no hereafter as a reward or punishment. Yeah, I think this way we'd be much better human beings. The world would be a much better place to live in and to share with each other. Frankly, I'd rather we were judged by our deeds in the present. Maybe this way many of us wouldn't feel so free to do bad things now, as though the hereafter's a long time off. But again, as a humanist, I think that if individuals want to live their lives according to their expectations of a heaven or a hell and a future afterlife, well, that's their right. But for me, I'd rather live my life in the here and now, according to my here and now responsibilities and conscience.
They're weird. They don't even believe in the Ten Commandments.
I think the Ten Commandments and the Bible were attempts to provide guidelines for ethical and moral behavior for their time and are still relevant. But even if I didn't believe the Bible and the Ten Commandments were okay for our time, I would never be against the civil and religious rights of people to believe in them, nor would any other humanist.
They want to promote the teaching of evolution in the schools and are against teaching creationism.
As a school principal, I am appalled that in this day and age, so many uneducated religious zealots have the arrogance to attempt to change standard educator-approved textbooks by removing Darwin and evolution and substituting the teaching of creationism as science. It reminds me of the earlier religious dogma which insisted that the sun revolved around the earth. We educators, along with the vast majority of other Americans, are against the teaching of religion as a science in a state-managed school system. It would be a flagrant violation of the Constitution's guarantee of the separation of church and state. There's nothing wrong with teaching religion, so long as it's taught in the home, church or temple, or comparative religion classes, but not in a school biology class.
They make all this fuss about the separation of church and state, even though religion is the basis of all governments, including America's.
Religion is not the basis of all governments, least of all in the United States where the Constitution is. And our Constitution's specific call for the separation of religion and government, church and state, is the result of the experience the first settlers had with the restrictions imposed upon them by the old world's control of the state by the church. Since then, religious freedom has been the reason millions of others have immigrated to America. And it's only through this separation of religion and government that people of all faiths are assured fair and equal treatment. So, in a democracy, the absolute right to all religious freedom must not depend upon the religion of the majority, or the religion of those in power, or the religion of a very vocal evangelical minority.
And some of them really get bent out of shape about invocations at government and public meetings.
I don't feel bent out of shape, but I do feel resentful when I either have to be part of invocations at non-religious government or military functions, or be embarrassed by drawing attention to myself when I choose not to take part in the prayers. I also get angry when it's taken for granted that I and everyone else there is of the same particular religion as the person who is leading the invocation, who is 9 out of 10 times a Christian minister or priest. Separation of the church from the state is guaranteed in the Constitution. And if it's not unlawful for a government agency to do this, then it certainly seems to be at least an act of arrogance and insensitivity. Incidentally, that also goes for the saying of grace imposed at both government and non-government functions.
Well, those were the humanist answers to the religious accusations against humanism. Humanism's basic, in a nutshell, message being that humanism is not against religion. It's just against forcing religion on someone else, because to do so would be un-American. As would be trying to diminish the separation of church and state through any backdoor or even front door maneuvers. And here are some answers to those hit-and-run political attacks on humanism.
They're against meeting our country's military needs.
It's dishonest rabble-rousing to single out the humanists as being against meeting our military needs, when so many millions of other Americans also feel that we reached nuclear overkill levels long ago. Time is running out for a bilateral freeze on the development and deployment of all nuclear weapons.
They're not loyal Americans.
That's nonsense. I'm a loyal American and also a humanist, and have been ever since someone sent me a copy of Carlos Lamont's book, The Philosophy of Humanism. So I read it, and I said, this is what I've been looking for. Unlike professional patriots, we humanists are loyal Americans every day of the week, and not just on the 4th of July and other national holidays. And it's a loyalty not limited to the immediate vicinity of the American flag. We believe patriotism means building a country of strong family ties, a willingness to help our neighbors so that our generation and those to come will be assured equal opportunity for all citizens alike, and that the air and water not be fouled by unlawful and irresponsible polluters or made lethal by toxic dumps and nuclear warfare. That's my humanist version of a caring, loyal American.
It's an alarming coincidence that the same people who would diminish your political and religious freedom are also the self-appointed, self-anointed guardians of the sexual attitudes and practices of millions of total strangers.
They're basically immoral.
He may be having a hard time deciding, but I'm not. Humanists are neither amoral nor immoral. Humanism is a moral and ethical philosophy designed to bring out the very best in humankind, as is the humanist standard for his or her own personal behavior. Our attitude towards sex is certainly not immoral. We believe that people shouldn't exploit each other sexually. We believe that sex is a very important part of human existence, and that it deserves very sensitive considerations. Sex, like religion, is a personal matter, and unless someone is victimized by it, it's a private matter, and should be nobody else's business but your own.
They're in favor of abortion.
No one has the right to the final say about abortion for me. That includes my husband, my parents, my sisters, brothers, relatives, and friends, and the government. I'll never understand how any male, or even any female stranger, can dare to assume they have the right to tell me or any other woman what to do about such a complex and personal matter. Humanists believe in family planning first as the best deterrent to abortion. But overall, we believe in the right of women to have the freedom of choice about abortion.
They want to teach sex education in schools.
What's wrong with a teacher trained in sex education, teaching it in a classroom, and parents teaching it at home, with the parents working out the attitudes and standards of sexual behavior as the parents' share of the responsibility? From what my students tell me, many parents are frequently too embarrassed or just plain unable to answer their scientific and medical questions because parents lack this knowledge themselves, probably because they weren't taught it in school or because they have their own sexual hang-ups. Speaking as a mother, I believe school is really the best place to demystify sex and give accurate information, as opposed to that given by embarrassed or uninformed parents, or in back alley or behind the barn lessons, or acquired through negative and damaging experiences.
They want to teach birth control in school.
These teenagers didn't understand and therefore didn't use birth control. Most of them feel guilty, abused, and rejected. Obviously, all that they'd heard about premarital sex from church, family, or uninformed peers, in addition to their own fears about becoming pregnant, was no substitute for professional education about birth control. Humanists feel that free access to education and information about birth control would prevent what is the leading cause of school dropouts, and that objective information about birth control is not an invitation to sex, but the best means to prevent personal tragedies and abortions.
They support gay rights and are responsible for the spread of homosexuality.
Of course humanists support gay rights. Humanists support the right of any individual to exercise their freedom of choice in a wide range of areas. Only the naive and the uninformed believe that a straight person can be talked into or seduced into homosexuality as a way of life. Psychologists and psychiatrists no longer believe it's a psychological disorder anymore or some arbitrary whim on the part of the individual. As a matter of fact, there's even some scientific evidence which indicates that there may be a biological predisposition toward homosexuality. But look, regardless of the cause, homosexuals, just like heterosexuals, are human beings with the same capacity toward altruism, honesty, and service to humanity. And like everyone else, they should be judged on those qualities, and not the uniquely personal and private matter of their sexual preference.
They're for free love and against marriage. Our answer to that ancient and unoriginal nonsense about free love is, we're married. So are most of our humanist friends. Humanism believes we shouldn't discourage normal human personality and behavior. Since most people marry because they love each other, for what reason would humanists try to reject or limit marriage? Humanists are strong believers in the concept of family, and even provide training for family counselors who then have the right to perform legal marriage ceremonies.
However, we humanists recognize that not all people are lucky enough to make love to somebody they love. So for all the millions of people that are not married or in a similar relationship, we feel that sexual activity is a matter of personal freedom and choice between consenting individuals.
They're in favor of ERA. That means a woman goes to war. They're against protecting women in any way. They don't even want men to open doors for them.
Of course humanists are in favor of ERA. So are a lot of people. ERA is the ultimate ethical and compassionate way to protect our mothers, sisters, daughters, wives, and the rest of the 51% of the population called women. Especially in our male-dominated, money and youth-oriented society. I think it's time that we made legal provisions for the equal rights of women, the Equal Rights Amendment. Oh, and please, don't believe all that ridiculous nonsense about sending our women to fight in war or forcing them to do jobs they're not physically equipped to do. Humanists don't want that. We just want to guarantee to women that if they want to join a combat-ready battalion, or if they enjoy the physical labor that accompanies some jobs, and the additional income, no one will prevent them from doing so, legally.
They want to infiltrate the government, pass laws against religion and morality.
That's totally false. I've been a humanist for 50 years, and a member of the American Humanist Association for almost as long. And I never heard, read, or known of any humanist wanting to control the government or pass laws against religion or morality. Just the opposite is true. Humanists are staunchly committed to an open and democratic society, inclusive of the rights of all people to worship or not to worship, as they please. As for morality, humanism adheres to the highest ethical ideas and teaches that whether or not an action is good or bad is to be judged by its consequences, both to the individual and society. Naturalistic humanism rejects all belief in the supernatural, including God and immortality, and holds as its supreme commitment the welfare and happiness of all humanity, according to the methods of reason, science, and democracy. We humanists desire only to improve the human condition and to protect our civil liberties and democratic freedoms, not usurp them. And we're equally against the government imposing any laws to control religion or personal morality. That's just not the government's job, as outlined in the Constitution.
They want to teach our children to make their own decisions without the guidance of the church or the family.
Not only do I have children, but grandchildren as well. Oh, I'm a firm believer in the family, as are almost all humanists. But we believe it's in the best interest of the family and of society in general that the parents' attitudes and opinions not be forced on their children, that the children be encouraged to learn and think for themselves.
Come on, Amanda, let's go look at the ducks.
Humanists have a great desire to preserve a young person's right to question and to free, unthreatened inquiry into all religious, ethical, political, and philosophical matters. We believe it's against entire societies, as well as the child's best interest, to be intimidated into becoming a rubber-stamped version of his parents or church.
Well, so much for answers to attacks and accusations. Now let's see how humanists answer those earlier and straightforward questions about humanists and humanism.
What is humanism?
That's such a basic and important question, and because it may have almost as many answers as there are humanists, we thought hearing from more than one humanist would provide a more comprehensive answer.
Humanists believe in the value and dignity of every human being.
Humanists believe the best way to live in this complex world is with truthfulness, compassion, love, and respect of other people's rights and feelings.
Humanism recognizes that we ourselves establish the moral and ethical principles which guide our everyday life, and that we alone are responsible for our own moral and ethical behavior.
Humanists believe that democracy is the best means of running our society.
To humanists, science is the best way to explain and understand the physical world we all share.
Humanism says that human beings are part of the many life forms on this planet, not independent of them, and that we share a responsibility for all living things and the environment in which they all must live. Humanists also believe that we shape our own destinies, whatever gods there may or may not be. We don't expect a supernatural being to solve our problems or the world's.
The simplest definition I can think of is that humanism is freedom of inquiry. Humanists feel free to explore anything, to ask questions, to agree or disagree as their reason convinces them. And by the same token, humanists support the rights of others to have that same freedom of inquiry, the same right to agree or disagree, the same freedom of thought that makes freedom of religion possible.
The dictionary definition is humanism, a system or attitude, a thought, religion, or philosophy in which human ideals and the perfection of the human personality are made central, so that the cultural and practical interests are the focus of attention, rather than theology and metaphysics.
I still like Dr. Albert Schweitzer's definition.
Humanism, in all its simplicity, is the only genuine spirituality. Only ethics and religion, which include within themselves the humanitarian ideal, have true value. Humanism is a precious result of rational meditation upon our existence and that of the world.
To which she'd like to add,
humanism is a joyful, positive philosophy. It gives special attention to the wonders and the beauties of nature and to the creative development in the arts. It's all based on warmth, caring, and human responsibility.
When did it start?
Humanism had its roots in ancient China, in classical Greece and Rome, in Christianity, Buddhism, Judaism, Islam, and in other religious groups in other periods. It grew out of a concept of humane feelings as opposed to violence and brutality, out of the appreciation of the beauty of art and music, and of the need to protect the weak, out of looking for answers to life and death through philosophy and logic, rather than through the supernatural and the metaphysical, a pursuit which produced a list of great men, some of them deified and some of them killed for these same stated concepts and their denial of supernatural cause and effect. In this century, organized humanism in the United States came out of the Unitarian and Universalist churches, the Free Religious Association, and the American Ethical Union. It came to public awareness with the formation of the Humanist Press Association, which published the New Humanist and the first Humanist Manifesto in 1933, one of whose signers was the great American educator and philosopher John Dewey. I'm proud also to have been one of its signers. In 1941, the Humanist Press Association became the American Humanist Association, and the title of its publication was changed to The Humanist, the name under which it still appears today. There are humanist organizations in 24 countries throughout the world. Together, they form the International Humanist and Ethical Union, which holds conferences internationally every 4 years and publishes its own quarterly. It is accredited and recognized in the United States, in the United Nations, and UNESCO.
It's time to answer the first in a group of questions whose interrelationship is, as we shall see, as important as each individual answer.
What's secular humanism?
It's from the word secular, meaning worldly or not sacred. Secular humanism is the practice of ethics without the involvement of God or supernaturalism, and calls for the highest standards of ethical and moral behavior with reliance on science and reason, democracy and love. It includes the principles of ethical philosophy and the love ethic of the Golden Rule. Secular humanists see no need for ritual or mystical dogma to achieve the highest levels of human accomplishment, caring, and fulfillment for this rather brief lifetime we share with our neighbors.
And the answer to this earlier question should be interesting to members of all religious denominations.
What's religious humanism?
While we religious humanists don't believe in a deity or the supernatural, we do believe that religion can be of definite value in human affairs when ethical and moral values are the primary concern of that religion. Religious humanism represents the positive attitude humanists feel towards basic religion and says that all things of concern to human well-being are included within the broad meaning of the term religion.
What is Christian humanism?
The answer to what it is should come as more of a challenge and a surprise to the religious fundamentalists.
Christian humanism, which to be accurate, should be called humanistic Christianity, believes that the primary function of religion should be to make people good in their hearts and actions, even as Jesus taught us.
We humanistic Christians are found in traditional churches, which place a very big emphasis on improving the lot of humanity, of feeding the hungry, of housing the homeless, of doing good deeds, and striving for social justice as our version of Christian responsibility.
Unlike we humanistic Christians, there are many Christian fundamentalists who do not believe that salvation can ever be won through good deeds, but only through faith in Jesus. To me, and others like me, salvation then becomes a bigoted and self-serving pursuit.
We humanistic Christians, while not renouncing God or Jesus or immortality, simply affirm that good works in this life are the best preparation, far and beyond church dogma, for what may or may not follow.
In the modern world, different denominations within the liberal churches are more and more stressing humanistic principles and goals.
We Unitarian Universalists, for instance, put our emphasis on the humanity of Jesus as a human being and his humanistic message, and decidedly reject biblical morality and myth when it offends human reason, moral sensibilities, and scientific fact.
That's very true. As a member of the Unitarian Universalist Church, I don't find any difference between the principles and goals of Unitarian humanists and those who call themselves either religious humanists, naturalistic humanists, ethical humanists, as in the Ethical Culture Society, or secular humanists.
And for what may be an interesting break or departure from the religion which predates Christ and Christianity.
What is Judaic humanism?
Judaic humanism is a distinct movement in the United States, Western Europe, and Israel. It's known organizationally as Humanistic Judaism. It can best be described as a non-theistic humanism, wrapped in the traditions of the Talmud and Jewish history, with a philosophy that reinforces our attachment to Jewish history and culture.
began 20 years ago in the first Detroit suburb where the first American Jewish humanist congregation was formed.
Now there are many such congregations nationally, all free from reliance on supernatural authority, relying solely on reason and scientific method to determine how to live and behave as better human beings.
So we humanistic Jews acknowledge our identity by celebrating all Jewish holidays and giving them a secular Jewish interpretation.
And we believe strongly in the right of Israel to be a state. But most of us are against the involvement of religion with its rigid orthodoxy in Israeli politics.
I guess the answers to the last three questions need the answer to this one for greater clarity.
Is humanism against religion?
Humanism is not against religion. There are many humanists who are religious, and there are many who are not. Humanists are just against religion being sneaked or forced into the political and educational fabric of this nation. I believe, that religion is the most fundamental choice all of us can make without connivance or pressure. All the Americans who died to preserve our democracy also died to ensure our freedom to worship or not to worship if that's our choice, and not to be forced to belong to any one denomination.
We're against religious groups using God and other religious reasons to try to influence the outcome of an election or to pressure for legislation, and especially to try to change the Constitution. We're just as against any religious group that tries to take away the rights of other religious groups, and also against people with no religious beliefs who try to do the same thing through pressure on the government or any of its agencies. And by the way, we feel just as strongly about the government itself trying to influence or control anyone's religious beliefs.
It's very simple and very fair. We want our elected officials to work for the government, not for any religious group or denomination.
We're concerned that so many times in world history, religion has been the cause and at times the actual instigator of terrible wars between nations. Look at what's happening in the Middle East, for example, where religion is so much a part of politics. Think of how many wars could be prevented and how many lives saved if religion would stay out of government and politics.
And not only is the separation between church and state a wise and necessary safeguard for America, but for the rest of the world, too.
The next two questions to be answered are like two sides of the same coin.
Is humanism a religion? Is humanism a philosophy?
Just as in ethical culture and religious humanism, many humanists regard humanism as their religion, a religion of ethics, without worship of a deity and prayer.
Many humanist organizations, including the American Humanist Association, have their own certified ministers or counselors who are legally authorized to perform weddings, act as chaplains in prisons, and all the other pastoral duties.
And to me, 20th century humanism is a moral philosophy that's appealing to people of different cultural backgrounds all over the world. It calls for the basic moral values, affirming the dignity and worth of every person, of living in harmony with nature, and of helping the sick and the poor.
Values that every traditional religion contains to a greater or lesser extent. Humanism as a moral or ethical standard is appealing to Jew, Gentile, Hindu, Muslim, Buddhist, and Christian alike.
Perhaps now you should have a better idea about whether humanism is religion, philosophy, or an ideal combination of both.
What's the difference between humanism and traditional religion?
Humanism was already present and influencing the ideas and values of the Mediterranean world when Christianity began. The humanism of today and today's Judeo-Christian moral and ethical values share a common historical heritage. Humanism differs only in how it views the source of these moral and ethical values. It holds that they are determined by humans themselves rather than being handed down from mountaintops by unseen gods or supernatural sources. Actually, if you were to remove all the theological and supernatural ideas from both Judaism and Christianity, you'd have humanism remaining as the basic ethical system. These ethics and morals dictate how we deal with, behave, and live with one another in this lifetime.
So much for the general. Now to the specific. Some answers to questions about how humanists regard current contemporary issues.
Why do humanists fight parents who want to remove from schools and libraries books that they find undesirable?
Humanists will always fight the pressure groups who want certain books removed from schools and libraries, no matter what their declared intentions might be. We feel that parents that want to remove or burn books are not only limiting what their own children will read and learn, but what other American children will read and learn, which is clearly a violation of the other children's constitutionally guaranteed rights to free speech and free inquiry.
Why shouldn't parents who send their children to private schools get tuition tax credits?
As a very concerned school administrator and as a humanist, I believe that parents who send their children to private or parochial schools should not receive tuition tax credits, because that would tend to subsidize the segregated schools of the bigot, the private schools of the wealthy, and religious education in general. All this out of the ever-diminishing and in many areas inadequate funding of our public school system.
Has evolution ever been proven scientifically?
Yes, evolution has been proven scientifically to the satisfaction of tens of thousands of scientists the world over. By contrast, creationism is a term manufactured by the religious fundamentalists for what they want taught in schools as science.
Science is a method of inquiry concerned with determining the truth about our physical world. It has for centuries gone about this search by adhering to a set of rules for discovering these truths called the scientific method. Using this scientific method of rigorous examination by the many disciplines of science, from biology to archaeology, from chemistry to paleontology, including physics, anatomy, astronomy, geology, and so on, this scientific inquiry, with its most stringent and rigorous requirements for accuracy and detail, has determined the following: that the Earth is at least 4.5 billion years old, and that man, as we recognize him, has been walking the planet for tens of thousands of years. Furthermore, scientific investigation has revealed, through meticulous evaluation of the fossilized remains of our human ancestors, that before man there was a creature that resembled our present-day apes, an ancestor for man and apes today. And that before these ape-like creatures, there were the reptiles. And long before the reptiles, hundreds of millions of years before, only the fossilized remains of plants and the simplest life forms are to be found. By using the most sophisticated and sensitive instruments, scientists can actually date these remains and those of the reptiles, the ape-like creatures, and man's most ancient ancestors to an accuracy sometimes of just a few hundred years. What this dating shows is that there has been a continual, progressive process of cumulative change from the simpler life forms to the present. This is not theory, it's fact. Fact based upon an accumulation of evidence by thousands of researchers working for over half a century. To discount, as the creationists, all the accumulated evidence literally unearthed by thousands of scientists and believe that God created the earth just 10,000 years ago with all the living things upon it in their present form is religion, requiring an act of faith that flies in the face of the contemporary understanding of science and scientifically developed facts. If we accept that it was science and the scientific method which got us to the moon and beyond through its research into the physical laws which we all agree govern our existence, then how can all these years of research into the origin of life by these same scientists and others like them be discounted as fiction?
And now for the last and bottom line question, one I'd like to answer myself.
If the old ways of believing in God, the Bible, and the Ten Commandments have served us so well, why reject all that and put our trust in humanism?
First off, there's no reason to totally reject the Bible or the Ten Commandments. Though you might look at how well they've served us. You can start with all the reports of anti-human behavior to be seen on tonight's TV news, or in any newspaper published in the last 50 years for your bottom line answer. I'm sure you'll see there seems to be a desperate need for something more than a dependence on the supernatural. If you agree that 20th century humanity is in trouble and needs help, perhaps the answer may be found in that old proverb, "The Lord helps those who help themselves." But How can we help ourselves while at the same time believe in the religion and philosophy of the Bible and the Ten Commandments? And what about those of us who don't believe in either? We suggest that all people who are alarmed at the increasing level of anti-human behavior in the world, to make sure at the very least they practice the moral and ethical elements of their religion and join with humanism in attaining 20th century moral, ethical, and pro-human goals. Humanists believe there is enough genius, wisdom, creativity, and innate goodness in mankind to make being alive the great natural gift that it is, considering how brief our lifetime is compared to the eternity of our death. Shouldn't we be striving to make our life on earth in the here and now a less painful and more humane place, free of needless wars, world hunger, poverty, and disease, and especially free of the religious and political fanaticism which so often maims and destroys the humanists that unites us as one? We've tried to answer questions on religion, politics, and morality within the time constraints of this film. It should be very obvious that as humanists, we believe that it's no longer enough just to make a small circle of love, one that's limited to self and family, but that it's in the best interests of self and family to make bigger circles until they include not only our own race, religion, country, or political philosophy, but circles big enough, strong and flexible enough to include the whole world in one human family.